Jennifer Landis Santos is a career and life transition coach at a company called Cassaday Company. She comes to us with 20 years of experience in counseling and coaching clients through life changes to help them get clarity on their vision and their next steps, supporting them in all dimensions of life, from professional to emotional, physical, spiritual, and relational well-being. Jen has a background in mental health, and she has a master's of arts in counseling. She's also a certified career counselor with the National Career Development Association and a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. Jen was trained in leadership coaching at Georgetown University's Institute for Transformational Leadership, where she's also currently on the faculty of the Health and Wellness Coaching Program. So thank you, Jen, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. I appreciate the invitation to be here. Good afternoon, buenas tardes, a mis colegas que hablan español. My name, as she said, is Jennifer Landis Santos. I'll tell you a little bit about me in the moment. So I'd love to know if there's something else you want to get out of this conversation beyond what coaching is, how it's different from counseling, therapy, or mentoring. Why does it matter? How is it helpful? What can you expect? If there's anything beyond that, I'd love for you to put that in the chat if there's something else you'd like to know. But again, before we get into all of that, I just want to take a moment and ask you to picture or think of one thing, one change, one shift you might like to make in your life. You can just write it down or hold it in your intention, hold it in your heart, or send a text to yourself. Think about one thing that you'd like to modify. One thing that would help your life be a little better, healthier, brighter, more satisfying. So we like stories because they help bring abstract concepts to life. So I will share my story with you for that purpose. Again, my name is Jennifer Landis Santos, and I'm joining you from Piscataway Lands, also now known as Alexandria, Virginia. To be honest, I never thought I would be a coach. It's a little abstract. It's a little frou-frou. It was never my goal or my intention, but this is where I've landed, and I'm really grateful for how it has all worked out. As a child, I was drawn to nature. Some things don't change, to entrepreneurism. And as I entered high school, I was drawn to psychology and understanding better why people behave the way they do. At college, I studied psychology, and one of my first jobs was working the overnight shift at a shelter for women who were fleeing situations of domestic violence. And that was a lot for a person in their young 20s. I saw a lot of eye-opening and horrible things. And I was drawn to the work because I could see the potential for transformation and for healing. And sometimes people would ask me, how can you do this work? You'd see really, really hard things. I met a woman who actually had the initials of someone carved in her face. And I'm a person of faith, and faith can take many forms. It can be faith in something bigger than we are. But I also have faith that others will find their way, right? That it's not all up to me, that I am just a facilitator. And so that is something that has kept me going and keeps me going. I believe we're all on a journey, and there might be dark moments on the path, but there's always a chance, a hope for new possibilities, for growth, for healing. After I got my master's degree in counseling, I continued to work in domestic violence intervention and crisis response in Chicago. And I worked with children at that point. And one of the most important things to know about working with children who are witnesses of domestic violence is that it's a trauma, and they often feel like it's their fault. Children tend to internalize things. They think that that the fighting is something that they did or didn't do, right? They blame themselves for it. And so I think it's just really important to get that message out there that it's not the children's fault. It's not your fault if you experience that. Adults are adults and kids are kids. So as we grow as adults, we become better able to hold that complexity and hold that stress. And I made my first career pivot when we relocated after that to higher education, where I worked in interreligious programming, and I managed a service-based learning scholarship. I loved working in higher ed. That was awesome. I made a lot of friends and missed the kids back from my Chicago days. And so I pivoted, made another career pivot to work with children who might not make it to college, because I wanted to be part of the village towards higher education. And that was my second career pivot back to mental health, this time not in crisis response, but in prevention work. And I worked in an elementary school again with kids, being part of a student support team, teaching kids about drugs and what they call protective factors, right? So increasing the social skills, communication skills, tips for dealing with stress, how to prevent violence, how to prevent substances, but it's prevention, right? It's what are we avoiding? What are we moving away from? What are we reducing? And that is all important work, but it was also very important for me to help people think, and for me too, to think about what are we moving towards, not what are we moving away from, right? What's the direction? Where are we going? Where's our compass? Not, what are we trying to keep out? So I really loved that work. I loved especially the children who were the ones that were constantly in trouble and that were disruptive in the classroom. And again, the framework was not a fit for me. I wanted to help individuals articulate and envision what they're moving towards in life. And since I had that counseling background, I began to pursue a certificate from the National Career Development Association on career development. And I also got certified in an aptitude test called the Highlands Ability Battery, which helps individuals understand their natural inclinations and articulate better what they intuit about themselves in regards to the roles, the environments, the context, the tasks that are a good fit. And really thinking about what kinds of problems they want to be solving. So at that point, I made another career pivot, and I went back to higher education, and I worked at a think tank. I had the opportunity to learn about the intersection of skills, jobs, and people at a macro level with economists. And I learned about the economic value of degrees, the importance of community college. I learned about debt, certificates, lifetime earnings. And I started a private practice in career counseling at that point. And I still felt like I needed another tool. I needed another skill set. And so I decided to pursue a coaching certificate. And I was attracted to Georgetown's Institute for Transformational Leadership because, in large part, the word transformational was there in their commitment, right, in their name. And I have just seen it over, in my own life, in my family's life, in neighbors' life, and in the clients that I had the privilege to accompany, the importance of transformation. And I also knew that the program had a commitment to excellence. And it was a really great program. I got to meet my dear friend, Phil Branco, and I learned a lot about executive leadership coaching, about how to lead from within. And I worked with some clients who were wanting to enhance their leadership presence. And I enjoyed that a lot. I still do some of the leadership presence work with clients who are thinking about transitioning careers, but just really they're burned out in their leadership role. It's hard to manage people. And it's hard to, get people on track. It's a lot going on right now, individually, team-oriented and beyond. And so a few years ago, because of my background in mental health and my focus on career wellness, I was invited to be part of the health and wellness coaching program, also at Georgetown at the Institute for Transformational Leadership. And I became a national board certified health and wellness coach this fall, just now, which was awesome. It was a lot of work, but I highly recommend it. And it's because I'm interested in how we move the needle from surviving to thriving in all areas of our life, in the physical and the emotional, in the mental, in the career, the spiritual, the societal, and all of these topics blend together. It's health, it's wellness, it's work, it's life. There's so many intersectionalities. So that brings us to present day. My little practice grew, especially with COVID and the great reevaluation that's happening, and people are experiencing, gaps, from their colleagues, and more work and fatigue, stress, anxiety, unknown. But I also miss being part of a team. So I had the opportunity to join a financial planning firm, Cassaday Company, which is in Tyson's, last year. And I'm building out a new service offering for people who are transitioning from retirement to retirement from full-time work. It's a big transition. We are so work focused. It's a big part of our identity, who we are, what we do, how we believe we add value to society through our work. So who are we when we're not working? That's a big question for a lot of people. So how do we shift that mindset from saving to spending? How do we create structure when we don't have work to create structure for us? How do we connect socially with other people when we're not hanging around with our colleagues? Does something else give us purpose, or was our work giving us purpose? Do we want to move? All of these nuances, volunteering, taking on another job. So it's really truly an honor and a privilege to sit with humans and clients as they sort out direction and get clarity. There's a lot of intensity and complexity that's happening in our world right now. And I just really love helping people articulate what they intuit about themselves, think about how they define success, not how their family or, their parents or their spouse or, whoever, their neighbor or whoever else defines success. Really sort of chipping away at what does it look like to be happy and have satisfying days where you can thrive and transform. So that's a little bit about me and my story. I know, Rebecca, you had wanted me to answer a few questions like what is a coach and how is it different from a mentor or a counselor or a therapist? Yeah, so it's a great question. This is a very common question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it. So there's a variety of functions that overlap and are similar, but the focus of a coach is to guide others by asking questions and structuring a process for the individual to achieve their goals. So it's very present and future focused. Mentoring emphasizes both the personal and the professional development of the individual. A mentor is someone who shares knowledge, skills, and experience, gives advice, helps others develop and grow. Therapists are often focused on diagnosis and treatment, and therapists are past looking. They are not as much focused in the future as coaches may be. Therapists help people heal from different events, and they can also provide some really important tools to help work through some severe situations such as anxiety or addictions or phobias. And counseling seeks to explore different dynamics between individuals and their relationships. Counselors often provide advice, and if they're licensed, typically by the state, counselors get licensed in mental health, by the state. They can also provide different treatments like therapists do. And coaches don't diagnose. Diagnoses are helpful in our world because they articulate a series of patterns or a cluster of behaviors. However, coaches we are trained often, hopefully, to resist labels and work with clients so that we're not buying into a story, right? To think critically about some of these stories that we're told. So for an example might be, if you have ADHD, maybe school has been a struggle because you were disorganized, you had a hard time getting things in on time, maybe you had some impulsivity, you talked a lot, you talked out of turn, you touched, you moved, you whatever, and so then you get this story about either you're not smart, you're not good at school, but really that story those patterns are the flip side of another coin, right? And on that other flip side of the ADHD coin, there's a lot of strengths. There's the ability to be creative, or to be spontaneous, or to hyper focus on something and really, get something done. People with ADHD are often more willing to take risks, right? Which is something we may need more of sometimes, not too many risks. Of course, everything, again, there's the spectrum of, illness and wellness, right? We don't want to be taking too many risks, but maybe you also don't want to take too few. So a coach is someone who really provides an opportunity and guidance to help evaluate these stories and evaluate these notions that we carry about ourselves, and think about, do they serve us? Do they open up opportunities for us? Or maybe they close opportunities for us. So to really think kind of deeply and critically about our habits and our patterns. So coaches, because these narratives, they can hold us back from reaching our full potential. And so coaches, again, they guide others by asking questions and helping structure a process that can help individuals articulate and achieve their goals. And so all of these, the therapist, the counselor, the mentor, they're all important to help us, find our way. So another question you asked for, Rebecca, was, when should I find a coach? And that's a great question. So I would say that a good time to find a coach is when you feel ready to make a change in your life, but you're not quite sure how to map it out and make it happen. You need a thought partner to kind of bounce around ideas, help you clarify, maybe not only do you not know how to get started, but maybe you don't even know where you're going, so help you clarify that direction, help you map out the next steps. There's different areas, and I've talked about a few of them already, right? There's the health and wellness, setting the healthy habits, making the shift on the spectrum from there's an illness to wellness continuum, right? And we can move and be in different areas depending on what's happening in our lives. Certainly, going through a pandemic, that's created a lot of factors that can shift us towards the illness, sitting more, being inside more, whatever it may be. Or maybe it's helped us, maybe we've been more active, maybe we've been outside and we've been able to shift more towards the wellness. But just, it's something that's in flux throughout our lives, right? And a coach can help move the needle towards wellness. There's career coaches. And so, of course, career coaches can help, clarify direction, understand how to make a pivot, how to use your transferable skills and communication, or leadership, management, so many information technology. There's so many different ways that you can articulate your skills and pivot them. There's leadership coaches if you're feeling stuck, as a leader with your team, or you want to get to the next level with your organization. They can be helpful. Organizational coaches. There's life coaches, which is a combination of a lot of these things, helping with relationships, making decisions. Maybe you have an urge to grow, or you're trying to figure out what to do next in life. It can be helpful to talk to a coach. There's relationship coaches, there's speech coaches, there's spiritual coaches, there's business coaches, there's finance and wealth coaches. There's tons of different options. So again, all of them help shift the needle in whatever area you're looking for a little bit, hopefully. And another question was, how do I find a coach and how do I know if it's a good fit? So a lot of people call themselves coaches and they're great coaches and they've never gone through a coach training program. They are wise, empathetic students of life. And I have several friends, dear friends, that I respect that fall into this category, that they never got any training and they're coaches and they're good. They're great. They're inspiring. And one of the benefits for seeking someone who is a credentialed coach is that that they have pledged to uphold certain ethical standards they have requirements of ongoing education, and they're mandated to keep up to date on trends and best practices in whatever their industry is. So you know that the information it should be relatively fresh, and again, they have those ethical standards. One of the credentialing bodies is the International Coach Federation, and that's the one I'm most familiar with because that's the one I participate in. And when you go through the coach training program, you are required to examine yourself in a more structured way and learn about your blind spots, because you are supporting clients and there's a power dynamic involved. And so you really have to understand who you are and honor the other and respect the other, especially if you are working with clients that don't look like you. Are you culturally competent? And another bunch of points to consider is your coach trauma informed? Do they have a basic understanding of mental health? And where is the line ethically around what they can help with and what they can't help with, especially if someone is struggling with anxiety or depression, right? Sometimes those lines can get really blurry. What's the protocol if someone is feeling suicidal, right? And reaches out to the coach. The coach doesn't know how to handle it. So those are points, those aren't necessarily covered in a coach training program, but coaches should ethically know that that's beyond their scope of competence, and it's not advisable to go there with a client, right? But rather to help a client get the support that they need from a qualified professional. So those are important things to consider. And I would also say, as it comes to fit, is it someone you feel comfortable with? What's their style? What kinds of questions do they ask? Does it resonate for you? Do they use direct communication? Can they help you name your emotions? Do they observe your body language? Those are things that coaches are trained to do. Observe body language, comment on it, reflect on it, and sort of notice what's not being said. Maybe you're talking a lot about something, but what are you not saying? You know, and a skilled coach should be able to kind of tease that out with you. The coach have a tool or a resource that you might be interested in using, or is it just more conversation based, you know? And what do you prefer? Some people like tools, some people don't like tools. So how available do you want them to be? Is it important to your coach have firsthand knowledge of whatever you're coming to for assistance? So I think I'll pause there. I've been talking a lot, and you can let me know what other questions you might have.
Yeah, Jen, this is so fascinating. I think I hope that our conversation continues on. I think actually you and I have some background that's similar. And also the fact that you've been in higher ed means that you understand a lot about what what it means to be a student, as well as somebody who's
Absolutely. Yeah.
in an institution like this. There is one question in the chat at this point. If anybody else has questions, please feel free to put them in as well. I have another kind of general question that I think might be of interest. And that is, say you found somebody, they look great on paper, you've met with them, you decide this is your coach. What happens? Actually, it's a two-pronged question, because my first question was, is there like an assessment that you would do? And related to that, like what happens when you, in that first coaching session, what generally can you expect?
That's a great question. So typically coaches give some sort of inquiry, or they have a fit conversation where you chat with them before you start working with them to get a sense if this is someone that can help you or not, if this is, you know, someone you feel comfortable with, what kind of questions do they ask, what's their approach. And you know, sometimes, you know, so you can also understand if you're new to coaching, people have a lot of notions that coaching it's like sports, right? I mean, you go out there and you do this and you do this and you do that. And some people are not sure what to do when someone asks them a lot of questions. You know, they kind of want guidance, they want that directiveness. And so it's important to have a conversation, you know, ahead of time and sort of figure out if that's a fit. So one of the things that I do with clients is that and this is what most coaches do, is that you have a conversation and you set what are the goals for our engagement together? What would you like to get out of our time together? What do you want to be working towards? And so there's sort of like the overall topic for the series of conversations. And then there's the goal for each conversation. If you have 4 or 5 conversations, maybe the first time, it's one step that builds to that larger point, so that you're not, kind of going down a rabbit hole of things that aren't quite as relevant. Did that answer your question?
That answers that answers it for me. I think that sounds good. And you mentioned too about having different tools, that some people would rather have, kind of a free-flowing kind of conversation, and then there also are a set of tools. What kind of tools do can coaches draw on and use?
Sure. I mean, I can speak to the ones that I use for career work. I use the Aptitude Test, which is the Highlands Ability Battery. I take a holistic approach. So I use aptitudes. Again, they help tease out the roles, the environments, the context, the tasks that are a good fit for you. It's not like a personality test where you are, answering prompts. Do you like to be outside? Do you like to be with a group of people? Do you talk to strangers in the elevator, right? You kind of get a sense of what that's asking. Aptitude tests are different because you're looking at numbers, diagrams, letters, you're hearing tones, and you don't really know what that has to do with how you solve problems, or which tasks or environments are the most stimulating for you, right? Or the most satisfying. So it really helps articulate what you intuit about yourself. And that's really helpful. I lost my screen here when I was trying to look for the chat. There we go.
That's okay. I can follow that along. So some of the tools are going to be kind of assessment kinds of tools.
Yes.
That you're able to draw on.
Or you all might be familiar with the leadership 360, right? Getting that perspective from different colleagues. That's another tool. There's several in health and wellness coaching that, measure your attitude towards readiness, or nutrition, or whatever the goal might be.
That's great. So you had this, you kind of draw this picture, kind of set some goals for yourselves. And then in general, do you work with people for like, what's an average amount of time that one might expect to be working with a coach?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, I think it depends on the person. It depends on the topic. Sometimes people, I think in general, this is what I usually do. It's usually 4, 5, 6-ish sessions, sometimes 10, but I think on average it's about 4 or 5. It's just, again, kind of setting that compass, right? Building out the map, checking in. And again, it's not a weekly thing. Typically people need more time and are busy. So it takes some time to reflect and to put things into place. It just depends. If there's a deadline, or if someone's trying to move or trying to, get a job quickly, then it's a little more often. But if it's more clarifying, or you're building a ramp, that's the term that we use a lot in retirement coaching, right? You're building this ramp towards whatever is next.
Got it. And that's actually a nice segue to one of the questions that is in the chat. And the question is, and I'll read it so that I don't misspeak. Coaches work with their clients on their future, which you had mentioned, but the future is always unknown. So what do you do if you plan something out with their client for the future, and then some uncertainty occurs that ruins that plan? And maybe that's anyway, I think that's a great question. Thank you, Devarshi, for that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, the future is always unknown. And one of the things that's important in life is flexibility, right? So if something you hope happen doesn't happen, how do you pivot? How are you flexible? I like thinking about, the growth mindset, Carol Dweck, and that work. And one of the things that I talk with people about, and I like this, I'm not sure where it came from, but this idea that failure is things turning out like differently than you hoped or anticipated, right? It's not, there's always something to learn there. So if things don't go as you hope, what can you learn? How can you apply it moving forward? How can you keep moving forward and not get stuck, right? Unless it's a time to reflect, what's the lesson that you need to reflect? We don't always have to be moving forward. There is time just to sit and reflect.
Right. So it may be that you have to have someone as a client, and then they go off on their way to do all of the things they've determined to do, and then they may end up coming back because of the lessons that they can
For
get
sure.
from the
Yeah.
unexpected.
There's the curveballs, right?
Sure. Yeah, there is. Oh, and the other question that's in the chat is one I'm particularly interested in because I'm in this position as well. And you talked about you're working now with people who are looking at retirement, right? Transitioning out of the workforce. Do you have any kind of specific suggestions, or is there couples coaching when one person is retiring and the other person is not? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so there's tools. Going back to tools again, there's a retirement coach association, which I'm a part of, and they have a couples quiz. I think they call it a couples quiz, which if you email me, I'd be happy to send it to you and you can use it. But it has, I think, 28 questions, and it goes through and it asks, how much time do you plan to spend together? Have you talked about how much you want to travel, how much you want to visit family, how much you want to budget for this, and then the responses are thought about it, talked about it, agreed on it, or not applicable. Right. And so if you and your spouse and your partner, your spouse, if you have a lot of different answers there, where one of them thinks, oh, we've agreed upon it, and the other one says, we've just talked about it, then it flags it. And those are the areas that you need to go more into depth on. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really thinking about, intentionally communicating. What are your expectations? And how do you get on the same page? Because it was interesting. Actually, yesterday I was talking to this couple, and they've been in their home for 40 years. They have, their adult children. One lives nearby, one is overseas, and they're trying to decide, where to move next. They know they want to stay in the area, but do they want to go to a condo? Do they want to go to a 55 and over community? And it was interesting because we went through this exercise that I have. And at the end of it, one of them said, oh, it's clear we're staying here. And the other one looked at him and was like, what? We're moving to a condo. Like, what are you talking about? Like even though we had gone through and they had developed their criteria for what they want, they still were not in sync with, they were interpreting it differently. Right. And so it was fun. I mean, it was fun to get it out there. They were fun to work with. They had a great, playful attitude with each other. And I also have worked with couples that don't have that playfulness, right? Where, I had someone stick their tongue out at the other one not so long. It was like, wow, okay. This is helpful, right? Because this is, if this is what's going on now, what's going on, when you're even more comfortable at home, right? And how do you surface it and talk about it with them in a way that's non-threatening, right? Because that is something that you want to do as a coach, is you want people to feel comfortable. You don't want to make them feel judged, right? Because people shut down. When we feel judged, we get defensive or we shut down, right? And that's not helpful. We're not gonna, be able to sort of articulate goals. So it's really understanding and having that empathetic approach that holds space and is clear and direct. Because if you ignore those kinds of things, then it's not helping, right? It needs to be addressed.
Right. And it's also, it sounds like the coach itself, because initially I'm thinking, well, certainly you can do like an online assessment and it will tell you the answers, right? But it sounds like the coach provides a safe place when the answers are not necessarily in sync, or you need to really be able to communicate.
Yeah. And I'm working with another couple. One of them got a cancer diagnosis recently, like a very serious, it's some cancers are manageable and kind of chronic illnesses, and some are not, right? And so they're navigating that, and they said, they're actually both therapists, and they're like, we just want you to be a witness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was what they wanted. They just wanted a space to talk about these things, to have somebody else to sort of hear and keep them accountable.
Right, right. So I'm thinking the examples that you're giving and some of the things that you said before, when I sort of pivot back to the students that are at Montgomery College, the transitions that they're going through, some of them are transitioning into college for the first time. Others are getting ready to transition out of college.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can just think of some questions that would be good questions for students who are making those kind of transitions to start asking themselves.
Sure. I think it's important for students, whenever I work with students, to think about, again, this holistic picture of their life, right? Like, it's not just the job. The job is one element of who you are. It's a vehicle to get to where you're going, right? It's not everything. We have this myth in our society, right? That we have a dream job, that it's going to check all your boxes and satisfy you and complete you. And it should give you a sense of satisfaction. It should pay you well. Yes, those things are very important. And there's a lot of ways to live a satisfying life and to incorporate other things in, whether it's relationships or, volunteering, what you want to learn about. Sometimes, there's so many other elements that you can bring in. So I always recommend students to think about how work is one element of who they want to be. And I'll just say one more thing. Sorry, this is kind of a long-winded answer. The other thing that I would say is that that it's helpful to think of some anchoring words. So what are some adjectives that you want other people to describe you as? Maybe 3 to 5 adjectives. And what are the experiences that you can have in your life? And what are the ways that you can show up that demonstrate those adjectives, right? So if you want to be helpful, or if you want to be kind, or if you want to be, I don't know, powerful, what are the things that are smart, or, influential? Like, if those are your words, if those are your grounding qualities, then what are you doing each day or in different interactions to make them happen?
That's great. That resonates for me. This is the time of year that students are getting ready to do those kinds of transitions. There are also the years when we're writing a lot of recommendation letters, where that is actually a great guiding post too, is to think about, like, what are the words that describe this person, and how do you tie that to what their goals might be, or their next steps.
And whenever we have a transition, whether it's leaving high school or leaving college, who do you want to be in it, and how do you want to show up for your life? So always having that as an anchor.
Yeah. And I'm going to put a plug in, and thanks to John Colleton, who pulled up the link for students that are with us tonight. If you're not with us tonight and you won't be able to see the chat, you can just look for this on the Montgomery College website. But we do have coaching at Montgomery College that is available to any student who is enrolled in classes. And there, I have just put the link in the chat if that's something that you might be interested in. The Achieving the Promise Academy has a lot of wonderful resources for students, and that is one of the things that they can offer, and likely will be able to help in some of the ways that you've described, Jen, that could be useful for students going through trying to make these decisions. Just
wanted to say, back to what I opened with, whatever the one thing is that you'd like to shift or change, whatever that is, if you feel like coaching can help, but you don't know how to get started, I would be happy. I've just put my email there. You can also reach me. I'm connected to a pretty large network of coaches, and I'd be happy to help, make that connection or get you on your way.
Fantastic. Thank you. And that kind of brings me to what it doesn't necessarily have to be the final question, but a question that is a little bit of a shift. If I have a lot of students who are interested in doing something like coaching or career counseling when they get out of school. And it sounds like your career took a lot of shifts and turns, and here you landed as a coach. Is there a like, what would you say? Is there a more direct route to becoming a coach from somebody who doesn't have the kinds of background experience that you have? What would you
Sure, yeah.
recommend as a path?
I think a coach training program is getting that training and that credentialing is the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And it sounds like, I mean, Georgetown has a program that
I'm incredibly biased, so
yeah.
but there are other very good programs in the area. I think it's nice. We've had a lot of success with our virtual cohorts, but it is nice to be in person, and there are several good in-person programs.
Right. Yeah. And I know that one of the credentials that you have is through this International Coaching Federation.
Yes.
Is that right?
So I would recommend, yes, the International Coach Federation, ICF. They credential the program. So I mean, I would recommend that if you want to get coach training, that you make sure that the program you go through is accredited, because I have gotten clients that way. People understand what ICF is. They go to the website, it says find a coach, right? They're looking for someone who is credentialed, who is trained and upholds ethical standards. And so I would definitely recommend for students who are interested in coaching to look for an ICF program.
Right. That sounds great. Well, those are the questions that I have, I believe. Let me see if I jot down notes while you're talking. And I thought it was interesting that you're working for a financial firm now too. It's not, so there are corporate places for coaches as well as independent.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of internal coaches. I have a dear friend who is working at an engineering firm. They have 50,000 employees worldwide. And she's in HR helping setting up an internal coaching program and helping, so staff can have a coaching mindset, because that's another thing that you learn to do as a coach. You learn to coach yourself, right? And that's really, really valuable in life. So yes, there's a lot of internal coaches.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you were talking about when you were going through your career and your thinking and how you got to where you are is that it sounds to me that coaching is not deficit based, right? That you look at a person without making those kind of value judgments. And I think that can be super, super empowering and eye-opening for people who are used to thinking in terms of what's wrong with me. I think that, that provides like a whole new way of getting help that's not related to necessarily,
that's
got this problematic thing.
A great way to phrase it, Rebecca. Yeah, it's definitely strengths based and not deficit based.
Yeah. I do hope that this is something that a lot of you will be looking into as a support for you going forward. There's so many different times in life, from transitioning from high school to college, to transitioning from work to retirement or beyond. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm so glad that you're able to share with us your experience and understanding. I think that it's very helpful.
Life is a series of transitions. Yeah. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.